My line producer came up to me right after lunch and said, "Do you have more money?" I had believed, based on where we were when we started, that we had enough money to get through all of principal. And so my line producer is coming to me saying, "If you don't have more money, Monday will be your last day of shooting." And we're only on day 5 of 15.
This is Unfiltered Filmmakers, where we talk to writers, producers, and directors about how they sold their scripts, got financing, and made their first films. If you're looking for an insider's conversation about the filmmaking experience, this is the podcast for you.
Jason Zavaleta, we're here to talk about your directorial debut. I wrote this for you. Amazing film, unique film. We're going to do a deep dive. I guess to start, on how you made your first feature. Give me a little bit about the synopsis.
So I wrote this for you is about a writer named Hunter who's living in Los Angeles, has a day job as a waiter, and has recently gone through a breakup and is trying to find his voice again and his emotional well-being, sort of restoring himself to a good place. So we kind of go with him on this journey of him being not in the best place and following him as to how he comes back to who he is.
I think everyone needs to go see this film. It is a unique and a deceptive film. It is one part romantic comedy, one part quirky and weird, one part auteur, and one part sci-fi fantasy.
Thank you for saying all the different facets of what makes up the film. When I went in to make it, I was like, this is the most untraditional thing. And everyone had said, oh, for your first feature, you need to make a horror film because it's the only thing that's going to sell and it's the only thing that, has enough genre convention. You can kind of do it easily. And so getting this script and thinking about this style and approach was thinking to myself, I couldn't be farther from what everyone's telling me to do.
One of the interesting things I noticed is that, one, you didn't write
Correct.
This feature. Talk to me a little bit about not writing your first feature.
Having things that I wanted to write and started writing, but then finding so much enjoyment in collaborating with a writer, looking at the story, analyzing the story, talking about the characters, and letting the writer have sort of the essence and the truth about what the arcs are in terms of the plot and the character's development. And then as the director, more sort of supervise and guide the writer towards honing those elements.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like, the director is the ultimate collaborator. I felt like I was going against the grain because everyone was saying to me, oh, the industry is going in the direction of they only want writer directors. I heard that over and over again, same thing. You have to do a horror film for your first feature. And I think I've just always been someone who just, okay, you tell me what to do and I'm going to do completely the opposite thing.
Was the process harder for you to pick this script or get to be attached to the feature script?
No, not at all. This was a very natural and smooth. Brennan Cook, who wrote the script and stars in the film, we had been collaborating at that point for about 8 years, and he had co-written with me a number of our short films in that 8-year period and starred in the work. Right after I graduated film school, I was in the Cannes Film Festival, had 2 shorts in the short film corner, came back, graduated. At the time I was living with my paternal grandmother, and 2 weeks after I graduated, she fell, broke her hip, and I became a full-time caregiver. So for that 4 years that followed, filmmaking became a back seat. I was a caregiver first and foremost. January 2017, she passed away, and I promised her on her deathbed that I would make a feature film that year. She had supported me since I was 8 years old. She bought me my first camera. She was my executive producer and financed a number of my shorts in college. And she had given me so many invaluable gifts of her guidance and of her love. And so I felt that there was no other way to honor her except to do what I really wanted to do. So that was January 2017. I didn't have a script, nothing when I made that commitment, and she passed away. April 2017, Brennan came to me and said, hey man, I've been writing down a bunch of notes about my experiences in Los Angeles, and I kind of wrote something out. Would you take a look at it? And that was the first draft of I Wrote This For You, and I read it, and immediately I said, I think this is going to be this is it. I think this is going to be the first feature, because it was all about a character who was struggling emotionally, feeling very lost, disconnected, mourning, and yet the world around him did not stop. And I just said, this is the reflection of my experience of my life right now. I can do this. I know that I have the ability to make this film. And so I said, let's just develop it and let's do it. And we did development from May to October, and we started production on what would have been my grandmother's 95th birthday.
That's amazing. How are you feeling day one?
I was so excited. And then 10 minutes in to the first day, after having a wonderful pep talk and meeting with the cast and the crew, a light box fell off of the truck and hit one of our grips in the head, and he had to go to the hospital. And in that first 10 minutes, I was like, all right, Murphy's Law. I mean, it's the first thing I learned in film school was Murphy's Law. So I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to let that dictate the rest of my experience. But
It sounded like you had a big influence over the script, like you got it early on.
very early on. And we actually, the whole piece of working the poetry community into it and setting that backdrop, we really developed that together along with Jasmine Williams, who was our poetry cultural advisor. She's now in charge of the Poetry Lounge locally here.
Are there any big ticket items already attached during the process of the writing? So like funding, talent, location?
We knew it was going to be shot here in Los Angeles on location. It was a very critical piece of the project because it was about Brennan's experience living in Los Angeles and how strange that can be.
Yep.
So we always knew that was going to be where we were shooting. And in terms of big tickets, no, we weren't. I knew Brennan was going to star in it. Knew we wanted Sarah Nyman for Phoenix's role. We had wanted to collaborate in college. We all went to undergrad together.
Gotcha.
And so knew we were going to probably cast Sarah in the role. And then what we didn't have was who was going to play Ariana. And we actually had another actress attached. Actually, the week of filming, our actress who was out in Georgia, who was on The Walking Dead, said, they just told us we're going to start shooting Walking Dead in, 2 weeks or whatever. Miss that. They're going to kill my character. And I can't do that. So she's like, I'm really sorry. I have to back out. Maybe 3 or 4 days before she was supposed to be on set. We were already in principal. I think we were 2 or 3 days, maybe 2 days in, when this was happening.
Yeah.
So we had to recast in that moment. And Brennan had been in some YouTube videos with Melise and thought that she would be good for the role. And I had Matt Stoner, my producer, reach out to her. And sure enough, she read the script and immediately agreed. I think that day. So we gave her, she had 2 days of prep and then came in.
To me, this was not a contained first feature, sir.
Contained? How do you mean?
There's a good amount of characters and a good amount of locations.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of external locations. Did that worry you any?
Not at all.
Not at all.
I was really excited about being able to shoot. And we did all of our permits, Film LA, and it was... If Film LA is watching this or listens to this, I'm going to share a bit about something that was very concerning to me. We had a permit for that area around Koreatown, St. Andrews, 6th Street, sticks on the ground, very simple setup. And then after we had gotten the permits and had done the flyering, my producer got a letter from a representative of the neighborhood community association. And they said, we know you're going to shoot on our street, whatever, this day. If you don't donate $1 million to our neighborhood association, we are going to park our cars in the street and effectively sabotage.
Yep. Wow.
Sabotage the work. I later found out that a board member of Film Los Angeles belongs to that neighborhood association.
Wow.
And I was very tempted to bring them a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Because that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I pay for a permit to go through the process, to be able to have the right to be able to do my work. That's what I pay them for. And here they are, trying to do some really sketchy stuff with someone who sits on the board. I couldn't believe it. I was very shocked. I mean, it worked out, honestly, because we found other places to do it, and it worked out totally fine. But
Did you shift to a different location?
Yeah, we shifted to another location that we also had it permitted for. We had pretty much pulled permits for that, like a 5-block radius in that area, so we could kind of move around.
things like that that just you got to deal with on the fly. You got to have that element of being flexible and spontaneous.
I think spontaneity is one of the core values of independent filmmaking.
Yeah.
If you don't have that ability to respond and to react and be creative and inventive in that spontaneity, it's going to be very challenging for you. Independent filmmaking, especially on location, on a tight budget, is not the space where you're going, it has to be this way. It's
Yep.
not your moment to Quentin Tarantino it. You got to just like go with what you have.
How many days did you end up? How many days were principal?
15 days of principal, and then we did 4 days of pickups and 1 day of aerial photography.
Wow, man. I mean, for the amount of locations you had, I feel like external, like company moves that you probably had to do.
Our first AD, Jordy Rader, phenomenal. I mean, she really worked with us to create a schedule that lent itself to doing as few company moves as we possibly could, because we knew it was going to be very challenging for us to have to do that, especially in the middle of the day in Los Angeles, especially going from like Hollywood to Koreatown.
Yep.
Or Pasadena to Glendale or Hollywood. So we were very diligent about that.
And talking about you didn't have one of your main talents a couple days in, I guess the former or love interest.
Yeah.
You had to like schedule those days together.
So Ariana, the character Ariana, the ex, her days were already set. I think her first day was our 4th or 5th day of principal photography, and then she was in for 3 days. That was the schedule. So when we lost our first actress, it was one of those things where it's just like you have to be available in 2 days and shoot for 3 days. Luckily it wasn't a big time commitment, right? Just 3 days of shooting. So
Gotcha.
I feel like that lent itself to being easier to secure someone. On top of that, Melise, having worked with Brennan, and also Melise as a singer, was very interested in a script where she could sing.
She could sing, yeah.
Also, the performance aspect of the poetry,
Yeah.
she was very excited about too.
What was the situation like trying to build that acting chemistry between the ex and your main character, I'm guessing not having any prep, not having any rehearsals with them, and they'd already been shooting while you're on set?
I think that's just the mark of very good actors. How many auditions do you think I saw for this film?
Do you have a casting director?
No.
Oh, wow. A 2-day, 3-day stretch of auditions is what I would have thought. Just have people come in and read.
And how many do you think in that time?
Solid 200?
How about 0?
Really?
I didn't see a single audition for this film. Phoenix went to college with, Brennan went to college with, Melise got brought in, Patrick Walker had not worked with, but had been friends with and had known when moving in the same circles for a while, who played Darius, his friend. Everyone else outside of that core group of people, were friends of the actors who were also actors, or friends of my producers who were also actors. Effectively, I really trusted them and said, who do you think would be good for this? Pull them in.
And so you didn't look at any tape of any of the other folks?
0.
Wow.
0.
Big
trust. Lot of trust.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Is that a thing you live by, or it's just in the moment?
No, I'm not going to put that cart before the horse again. And I think I wouldn't recommend it.
Gotcha.
It's not something I would say to, if you're a first-time directors, that you go ahead and just pull people in willy-nilly. I would not recommend it at all. I think it's because that my core team, my writer, my lead actor, my producers, all were in circles of actors and had close friends who were actors, that it just became a very and because we were all so close working on the project, we knew exactly who we needed.
Which is insane to me, because our main character and Phoenix, chemistry jumped off the screen. This is a duo. Just the funny banter, him laying back down in bed with the jeans on, like being comedic and all the other elements.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, and having gone to college with both Brennan and Sarah and watching them perform on stage, and I had seen them perform on stage together.
Okay.
I had also I did a music video with them, the two of them starring in a romantic relationship. Although there was no dialogue, I was able to see their chemistry just in their performances. And I absolutely loved Sarah's ability to go from just the funniest, like witty, to really serious, emotional, dramatic like
Yeah.
shifts. And
Were there any moments that you had to go into your bag and say, okay, we kind of need to get this a little bit more, or can we try some other different things?
I did, although the sequence in which I had to do that for didn't make the final cut.
Gotcha.
We actually had 3 scenes that took place inside Hunter's brain
Oh, wow.
that had a long executive board table, and then different pieces of his personality, like think of Inside Out,
Yep.
sort of seated around the room representing different pieces of his personality.
Yeah.
And they were in these sort of critical moments in 3 different points of the film. They were having debates about what he should do or what was going on, or what choices to make in that moment. And we had built this beautiful circular set that was painted like a brain, and we had done visual effects to make it like kind of have electrical impulses like a brain. It was
Yeah.
really cool. I was really excited about it. It was like the most fun piece of the project. And then we got to I think maybe the 3rd cut, and Steve Bloom, bless his heart, a mentor of mine, who was the editor of Pixar's Coco, was looking at it and he goes, "What is this doing? Do you really need it?" And I was like, "Steve, I need it. It's like so cool." He was like, "That's not a good reason to keep it in." And I was like, I respect the mentor, and and
Yeah.
so so it got cut. But that was a very unique experience, and I say that I had to reach into my bag as a director, because when you don't see auditions and you have a cast of 7 people who have just been thrown together representing different parts of one person's emotional body, there has to be a synchronicity between them. I think we did 4 or 5 takes in the first day to start it off, and it was not there. And what I realized is the way I needed to do it was I had to focus on getting individual lines really good, and then utilizing the edit to make them feel like the way they needed to flow.
Gotcha.
And create the pacing and the space between the lines. We covered that scene by having a camera on a dolly that was rotating around the entire brain room.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just sort of like, okay, well, that line was okay. The next person's line we needed to do again, so let's just shift the dolly this way and capture that again. So it was easy to cover because it was just one camera setup. That required some real directorial technique.
And that must have been a hard thing for you to cut.
Well, I'll give you another consideration. We had also spent probably almost a third, if not 25% of the production budget just on those sequences, because they were so in-depth build-wise, production design-wise. So to go to my producers and say, "Hey guys, I'm going to cut this very expensive sequence," was challenging.
Talk to me about it.
Luckily it wasn't like me just saying, "Okay, I need to do this." I had Steve's guidance and support, and also Anna Rotke, the editor. We had talked through these notes. And so when it became clear that this was what was going to be best for the film, then it was simply about approaching the producing team and saying, "Look, we've talked about it ad nauseum. This is why it doesn't work. We're going to cut it out." And Matt Stoner, my primary producing partner, at first was resistant. But he said, "Okay, let's do it. And if we really need to, we can just put it back in." But then once we got through it, seeing it out, no one missed it. I mean, and that's where, as a director, no matter how much you love whatever it is that you're making, your first and foremost responsibility is to the picture itself. And if what you love about it is hindering the picture's overall quality, or it's hindering the pacing, or anything that's getting in the way, and multiple people are telling you, "Hey, this is getting in the way," your ego isn't better than the greater good of the film.
Yep.
And I think that's something that I would want to remind first-time directors of, is that there's nothing wrong with having your vision. Believe in your vision. It's the spark, it's the fire that burns that makes you who you are. Also, be willing and open to eliminating things that don't serve.
How much time passed between principal and reshoots?
Let's say we did 5 days on, 2 days off, 5 days on, 2 days off, and then 4 days. So we did 3 weeks back to back for principal. That was November to, I think we wrapped just after Thanksgiving. And then reshoots took place in April of 2018. We had done a test screening at the American Film Institute, and from that we had collected and prepared what we were going to need for the reshoots. I was initially given 2 days for reshoots, and I went back to the producing team and said I need 4. And I really had to justify 2 additional days. Matt did not want to give me, obviously, I mean, it's expensive to add another 2 days.
Yep.
I didn't disagree with him that it was expensive. I did say, ultimately, if you give me 4 days, I promise you won't regret it. And did the 4 days and then integrated the material. By the time he watched the film, he was like, wow, I'm glad I gave you the 4 days.
What were some of the areas that you had to reshoot?
So we actually lost a day of footage in principle, which was the scene with Hunter and the piano player.
Oh, wow.
And that was a very critical scene for me because it was so authentic. And John Hung, who is the piano player, Taiwanese immigrant, never acted in his life. You know, I really wanted him to do the film, and he had agreed to do the film. And, you know, so when we shot it, and it was beautiful, it was really heart-wrenching to lose that footage. However, when we came back to shoot it in April, because he had that experience and remember what it was like, he actually asked me if he could improv because he knew the character, he knew what was taking place, and now he wanted to just sort of play off of that. Everything he improvised ended up in the final cut because it was so beautiful. Some of the other things we needed to reshoot was after Phoenix leaves Hunter, and Hunter is going through this sort of trapped emotional breakdown, we realized that there wasn't an emotional bridge between the moment Phoenix leaves and him going to go retrieve her paintings. That the way it was in the script was that Phoenix left and he like immediately goes to go get the paintings. And as we were watching the edit, something felt we were missing an emotional transformation there. Of why does he suddenly choose to go out of his way to get these paintings? So the whole sequence from Phoenix leaving all the way through Nina Hartley's wonderful barraging of him in the restaurant, and that emotional sequence of him standing in the Venice canals and having people just walk by him and his friends whispering, you know, lines from earlier in the film that recalled this moment for him of reflectiveness, of the impact of him being isolated and alone. That entire sequence was written for the reshoots.
Oh, wow. That was not in the original?
That was not in the original script.
Wow.
So we wrote that in, and that was an entire day.
Was that based on the screening?
That was based on the screening and a number of notes that the core team had given.
Give me like 1 or 2 most challenging or worst moment on set, and then 2 of like most rewarding and most amazing moments on set.
At the end of the first week, my line producer came up to me right after lunch and said, "Do you have more money?" I had believed, based on where we were when we started, that we had enough money to get through all of principal. And so my line producer is coming to me saying, if you don't have more money, Monday will be your last day of shooting. And we're only on day 5 of 15. That took the most emotional maturity and control because I was in the middle of my shooting day. I had to make the rest of the day. I had to go in and direct. And I also had to deal with the fact that this was going on. Matt was having some personal challenges at the time as well. And so he was in a very challenged emotional state. So I sort of had to move into the position of both directing and lead producer on that day and had to rally Matt. I said, look, we're so in this, we can't stop now. What can we do to make this happen? And I need to focus on directing, so I'm going to trust you to get it done. And over the weekend, I believe he secured another around maybe $100,000 in like 3 days. Kudos to Matt for all the conversations and all the work that he had to do to go out and to get that kind of trust from people. in a very short amount of time. He saved the project. As an independent filmmaker, to choose people who are going to step up and go to bat for you, especially as a director, are essential, and no matter, what's going on in the background, if they're able to rise up and make it happen, it's worthwhile to collaborate and invest with those people.
Yeah. What's one of the most rewarding things for you?
We had a lot of wonderful day players who came in for this film. Stephen Anthony Lawrence, who played Beans, and even Stevens, Nina Hartley from Boogie Nights, Richie Montgomery, who's been in a number of Tarantino's films, Hateful Eight, Django, Michael Badalucco, Emmy Award winner for The Practice, also in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And having these very established actors come in as day players and just watching the magic of them come in and bring that level of experience to a scene, even though it's just for a brief moment, was just such a joy to watch. Stephen Halbert, who was my production sound mixer, was also the production sound mixer for Boogie Nights.
Nice.
So to have Stephen and have Nina, and then Stephen he had gifted me the headphones that Paul Thomas Anderson had used on Boogie Nights. So here I was day after day using I call them the PTA headphones, being in that moment. And then to suddenly have Nina on the set in front of the camera. And, it just it stirs a level of emotion. Also, we had a 57 millimeter lens from Panavision that Spielberg had used on E.T.
Oh, wow.
And E.T. was the film that got me into filmmaking. So to have one of those lenses on my camera for my first feature was just like, wow. Also, myself directing, Brennan wrote and starred, and Matt produced. All three of our fathers make cameos in the film.
Nice.
So the joke between the three of us was we just called it Dads, the movie.
Speaking of these higher, more established day players, how were you and your team able to get as day players?
Brennan had done the show with Zach Galifianakis, had met Richie. They were together on that show, so that's how Richie came on. Mike Badalucco was co-starring in a film with Brennan that was shooting in Italy, and I had gone to Italy to spend some time with them on the set, and Michael and I had developed a good relationship, and so I had asked him to make the appearance as the producing character. And Nina had done a film with both Brennan and Matt. They already knew each other. Steven was friends with Matt and Brennan, and they would hang out, and I think they would do like game nights together and things like that. So yeah, they were all first degree connections of mostly Matt or Brennan. A hilarious moment when Richie Montgomery was there for his scene where he's making very obnoxious comments in the restaurant.
Yep.
And he goes to complain to the waitress about his food, and in the very first take, he said some very crass, dirty stuff, and so my eyes were wide open after the first take, and I was like, did he really just say that? Oh my gosh. So I went over to him and I was like, Richie, that was really great, man. I think we're gonna need to tone it back. And he goes, oh yeah, sorry, man. I forgot I'm not on a Quentin set. And that made me laugh. And also what an honor for him to for whatever reason associate him being on my set with Quentin Tarantino. I took that as a really beautiful compliment. And that also just made me laugh because that's, he's so used to going so big and over the top for Quentin. And then here I am being like, can you not Quentin Tarantino it? Can you, reel it back?
That's one of my favorite scenes. Because I was like, I want to see how long you play it of him not even paying attention to him.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. He's so focused. And yeah, it was such a fun that scene had to be reshot.
Oh, did it?
But we the parts with Richie did not. We only reshot the parts with Hunter and Darius at the table.
But you didn't. None of the parts where you got
none
him
of the
in
parts
the background?
to Richie. Richie was already covered. That stuff was good.
Okay.
I wanted to get some more coverage of Patrick as Darius and give him some more opportunities for us to see how Darius is handling Hunter's response and his emotional disconnect.
Looking back now, coming out of Principal, would you have gone into Principal doing anything different?
I would probably review my budget again. before, really double checking the line items. I think, and as a director, I don't know of a first time feature director who is not also serving in some producing capacity.
Yeah.
So in that sense, why not hold yourself accountable and make sure that you're good to go? I would not want to be in that position again, where it's like, okay, I'm 5 days in, I need another $100,000. Not the place. I never want to be there again.
Yep.
So yeah, double check the line items. Take another deep dive with the script. And I do that now in my projects, to really sit down with the writer, go through the scene and say, what is the purpose of this scene? What are we getting? What are we not getting? What do we need to change? Or can we remove it before going into production? That's actually, like, looking back at how my production went. If I had done more of that detail work with Brennan and the script in advance, I think we would have saved a lot of time and headache in production and in post.
How long was post?
So we started post January 2018. I think we completed post mid-May. So
And that's
4.5 months.
Once reshoots came in.
Including reshoots.
Gotcha. One of the things that jumped out at me when I was looking at the IMDb is the producer list and the production assistant list. Some of those co-executive and that entire team, was that on from the beginning, or was that people coming on throughout the process?
The core producing team was myself, Matt Stoner, and Stefania Pierucci.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone else started to come on. Yeah, so we started to add to the team, and then our EPs, as we started to do financing, attached them. It started as 3, and then the roster grew.
Gotcha.
Because I knew that once we went into principal, that I was going to have to focus on directing. That I couldn't perform duties really as a principal producer. Having those additional associate producers and line producers really helped take that burden and that fear off of me.
As far as funding, like, how much was the budget?
The budget ended up being about $500,000.
How did you divvy that between production and post?
80% was production and 20% was post.
All liquid? Any in-kind favors or deferred?
I mean, we did have in-kind. I don't think we did anything deferred. And then all private equity liquid funding. All private investors, including myself, Matt, a number of members of Matt's family, quite a bit of personal investment. I put every dollar that I had to my name in the film. Growing up in the Bay Area, looking up to George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola, and knowing Francis's story very well, I really felt that it was my responsibility to invest in myself and in my own work. I never forget Tom Luddy, rest in peace, the founder of the Telluride Film Festival. I went to Tom that September as I was preparing to do the film, and was very excited and said, Tom, I'm making my first feature. He said, oh, that's great. How'd you fund it? And I said, well, did what Francis did, put all my money in there. And he goes, well, I'm going to tell you what I told Francis all those years ago. That's a really terrible idea, and you shouldn't do that. And I laughed.
He's almost saying, go do it.
Exactly. He's like, I'm going to tell you. Yeah, he's like, I told him, but obviously he did what he did. And I was like, well, I mean, I would like to follow in that path, in my own way.
So now that you've finished film, how are you feeling?
Yeah, when the film was finished, I was tired. I was tired. There was a lot of emotional roller coasters.
Did it feel, I'm done?
It did. It felt done, and not without sacrifice. A lot of my personal relationships with some of my collaborators, ended up taking some pretty serious hits through the process of making the film, and that was a sacrifice I wish I didn't have to make. And that's another thing that I would say to first-time directors and filmmakers and anyone who's working with your friends and people who you care about. Know that when you combine your work with your friendship, it exposes you to a level of tension and stress. So I would just shed that light. I think just communicate and be really clear about what your expectations are, especially as a director, and the more you can communicate what your expectations are and the way you want to work with them, I think the easier that process will be.
Where did you premiere? Did you do the festival route?
So our world premiere was at the Alexandria Film Festival in Virginia. That was a beautiful experience in a theater. My mom flew out. It's really, really wonderful. We took the special jury prize at that festival, and then we had our West Coast premiere at Dances with Films at the Chinese Theater.
Yeah.
Submitted to all the big ones. didn't get in.
Like all of us. Why do we do this? Can we just have a moment? Why do we do this to ourselves? Like every time, and we keep telling ourselves we're not going to do it. We're going to be strategic. We know the film festivals that play to our film, but the moment we get on Film Freeway, we still got to submit to the top 5.
Because you want to believe. You want to. We all believe. We all want to believe that there's a possibility that we can get in. And you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So why
Sure.
not submit, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like being, but be real with your expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually realized, one of the things that I did was I pushed post to be faster to be able to submit to festivals.
Yep.
And I think that was an unreasonable approach. I don't think that you should rush yourself for the sake of trying to get into a place that you may not even get into.
Yep. I have a whole theory about the Ponzi schemes of film festivals, or most of them. There's a lot of political red tape, especially a lot of the top ones. You've heard the stories in certain film festivals, early submission, day one of submission, 50% of the slots already filled, whether it's just backdoor connections or like executive managers, studios. And so they're banking off of that. Like last year, Sundance got, was it 20,000 submissions? They're only selecting 120 features and maybe, I think, 60, 70 shorts. And it's an interesting thing we do every single time. And I feel like festival strategy is so important, kind of like the quality of putting in the time, like not rushing, as you're saying, post. I never believe in submitting an early copy, even though they say, oh, it's okay. I never. Did you submit it earlier,
I
like
did.
an unfinished
I
copy?
did. I did. Sound had not been done. Color had not been done. There was another. It's not that I don't believe in it. It's just that I think about watching in progress works, and it's just so challenging if you're not in the room and in
Yep.
part of the conversations to know what's going to happen. When you do the test screening for the first time and you're getting raw reactions, oh my gosh, it's just like it tells you so much about where people's heads are at.
Yep.
That's honestly, I would actually say, before submitting anywhere, to at least 2 test screenings
Before submitting.
Wow. Because get an audience to tell you what they think. Because if your audience is having trouble or whatever it is, then you know damn well that a festival programmer is going to be. You think about it, when they say your first 30 minutes, even less, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the most important. I think they say that because that has more to do with festivals. Because a programmer who's looking at your work that may be the only thing they get through. And so if you're not selling them in 15 minutes.
At what point did you get distribution?
We brought on a sales agent. I think the beginning of our festival run, I think maybe we had done 3 or 4 festivals before we brought in our sales rep. And I would say maybe like 6 months in, I think we had some good prospects. We went through Gravitas Ventures, and that was non-exclusive streaming North America. That was our initial distribution, and then we moved to, I forget, there's a couple. We have a European company that's doing European television, VOD, SVOD, and then we have another company that's the ones that did the Latin market that dubbed it in Portuguese and in Spanish. So those are the 3 deals that we had. So I feel like this is a piece that will get revisited in the future, so I'm not so worried about its distribution right now.
Yeah. What part of the process did you get your representation? Was it after the film was finished?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I believe Matt had been courted by a few people at festivals who had seen the film and were really interested.
And now we're wrapping up. Like, what's life like for you after the film? What are you working on these days?
I'm working on quite a bit. Got 3 features in the works right now. One is a science fiction psychological thriller. That's a really unique sort of origin story of Area 51, kind of from the Native American point of view. And then doing a biopic on the inventor of the radio, Guillermo Marconi.
Yep.
And then another character drama about a woman who's trapped in her house with hoarding disorder.
How did these come on your radar?
The science fiction project I got pulled into JV, and the biopic been developing for 14 years at the request of Marconi's daughter, Elettra, who I met. The hoarding project was something that I've wanted to do for a long time. Now I'm finally getting around to doing it.
Well, man, I'm excited for you. I appreciate you, joining me on this conversation about making your first feature. And
yeah, it's been great. Thanks for letting me share, and I hope that everyone who's listening out there who's going through the process, I think number one, persist, believe in yourself. And if you really need to make the film, even if it's just, small crew, whatever. Don't necessarily believe that if you don't get all this money, it's not, there's no other way to do it. If you have to do it, do it.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for being here, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
Peace.
That wraps up today's conversation. If you're on the journey to make your first film or just want to hear more about filmmaking experiences, subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and connect with us on Instagram. Stay tuned for the next one.